This video is going to be a quick review for the third standard of the USVA history curriculum for the state of Virginia. The standard reads, the student will describe how the values and institutions of European economic and political life took root in the colonies and how slavery reshaped European and African life in the Americas. The first of the essential understandings that the state really wants you to understand is that economic and political institutions in the colonies developed in ways that were either typically European or were distinctly American as climate, soil, conditions, and natural resources shaped regional and economic development. The next is that the African slave trade and the development of slave labor system in many of the colonies resulted from plantation economies and labor shortages. The essential questions that the state wants you to consider are, how did the economic activity and political institutions of the three colonial regions reflect the resources and/or the European origins of their settlers? Why was slavery introduced into the colonies? And ultimately, how did the institution of slavery influence European and African life in the colonies? Let's take a look at the distinct regions that came about in the British colonies on the American continent. So for starters, you're going to have the New England colonies, which are also considered the northern colonies. And as you can see here, you have Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. The New England colonies were built mostly around these kind of small, tight-knit religious communities, and these religious beliefs significantly influenced the community structure. And these communities had kind of been built around this premise of a covenant community, and that their worship was the central part of their life. The main distinct group that settled up in the Massachusetts Bay Colony were known as the Puritans, and they were headed by the governor John Winthrop, and he was the governor of this Massachusetts Bay Colony, and he had delivered this big sermon known as the City Upon a Hill, and he saw the Puritans as this Christian example to the entire world. And these people, they experienced direct democracy through what are known as town hall meetings, and basically people that owned land and practiced the faith, these men would be able to partake in this democracy in these town hall meetings and be able to vote on things directly. And while the Puritans were looking to be able to worship how they wanted and were looking for religious freedom when they left England, they were not necessarily super keen on people worshiping how they wanted. And what happens is you get two people, in particular, a man named Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson, that kind of really disrupt how things are going in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And they're both going to be exiled from Massachusetts. Roger Williams was seen as spreading new and dangerous ideas in this religious community, and he's going to leave and found Providence. And Anne Hutchinson is going to be responsible for holding kind of Bible study groups for women and anyone else who really wanted to partake, but as a woman wasn't really seen as being able to kind of lead this type of discussion in the community, and she is also going to be exiled. And the two of them, their cities and towns that they found, Providence and Portsmouth, are going to combine into what becomes known as Rhode Island, which you can see on where it is located on the map down there. As far as the economics of the northern colonies, you basically have really small subsistence farming, right? The soil really isn't that great up in the north, and it's not super productive, so it really only works on a small scale. But you keep in mind where they're located on the sea, on the ocean, on the Atlantic Ocean, and you're going to have some major kind of industry pop up around that. So you're going to have a major fishing industry, also whaling as well is going to be a key industry. You're going to have shipbuilding, building ships out on the harbors there, and that's going to be fueled by also a major logging industry as well. And all these people kind of are going to be aided by what's considered this Puritan work ethic, and they're all going to be extremely hard workers, working to build a great life for themselves and to kind of continue this ongoing. So now looking at the middle colonies, and you have New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, which you can see all in yellow there on our map. The middle colonies were a bit different in comparison to the northern colonies, and you're going to kind of have there's the home to kind of multiple different religious groups. You're going to have typically kind of a lot more religious tolerance in this area, and you're going to have Huguenots, they're called, settling in New York, as well as a decently large Jewish population as well in New York, which is going to still thrive into today. You're going to have a group known as the Presbyterians, which is just another Protestant group that are going to kind of settle in New Jersey. And ultimately, you're going to have this man named William Penn, who is going to be a member of this Quaker group, who's going to be granted land in the Pennsylvania colony and is going to establish Pennsylvania. And you're going to get the city of Philadelphia as well as a big port city in this region. And these colonies are going to have a lot more of a flexible social structures. People of all different classes are going to interact with one another in how their economies work. The economy of the middle colonies is really based on similar stuff as the north on some level. You're going to have some small-scale farming, but you're going to have a lot better soil here in the middle colonies. So while you have small-scale farming, it's going to kind of evolve into a lot larger of farming as well. You're going to have shipbuilding as well, making a part of the economy on these coastal cities, especially New York and Philadelphia. And also you're going to kind of get these skilled artisans and entrepreneurs. An artisan being someone who creates something from raw materials, and entrepreneurs, people being who start businesses. And these people are going to really develop trade around these enterprises. And as I was kind of saying, New York and Philadelphia grow as these kind of really important seaports and commercial centers in the middle colonies. So now taking a quick look at the southern colonies, you have Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, and you can see those on this map here to the right as well. Much of the social structure in the South was really based on kind of your family status and the ownership of land. So the more land that you owned, typically the more status you were going to have in the community. And you're going to get these kind of large landowners and really in these eastern lowlands of this area, getting east of the mountains and kind of really along the coast and along what's known as these tidewater areas of the South. And you're going to basically have these people really dominating the colonial government and the society at this time. These people are going to maintain kind of an allegiance to the Church of England, right? The Anglican Church we'd been talking about. And as a result of that, they're going to really maintain a lot closer social ties to Britain than the other colonies. And as a result of that, you're going to see the British actually trying to take advantage of that during the American Revolution. The economy of the South, again, is going to be really fueled by these coastal lowlands we were just talking about, where you're going to get these large-scale plantations popping up along what's known as the tidewater areas, which allowed easy access out to the ocean. And what's really going to develop is these plantations are going to grow what are known as cash crops. And the big cash crop is going to remain tobacco, but you're also going to get rice and indigo, which is going to act as a flour that basically you can make a dye from, is going to really all become valuable things for these plantations to grow. But getting away from these large-scale plantations, you're also going to have members of society that are in what's called the backcountry. And in the backcountry, these people are going to be really kind of more fending for themselves. It's going to be this small subsistence farming again, all by themselves. They're going to rely on hunting and trading with the other small amounts of people out in the west, in the Shenandoah Valley, and also in the more mountainous regions, of the Appalachia. And these people are going to be known as the Scots-Irish and typically of English descent. And these people are going to be kind of your poor indentured servants that are looking for land once their term is up, or just poorer people that kind of worked their way over, and they are now trying to get away from the more crowded areas along the coast and work their way inward. The agricultural economy of the South is really going to be based off of these plantations, which are really going to require a cheap labor on a very large scale, right? We're talking these plantations being sometimes thousands of acres and requiring hundreds, if not thousands of workers in some case. So What's going to happen is that initially you're going to start with what's called indentured servants. And typically these indentured servants were poor people from England, Scotland, or Ireland who had agreed to work for a period of time, typically anywhere from 4 to 7 years, but really it could be whatever you agree upon as the payment for your passage over from Europe, or it could also be kind of relief from debts that you had accumulated over in Europe. So these people were brought over and they worked, and once their time was up, they'd be granted their freedom and be able to go about into the colonies and do whatever they wanted. So it's going to get away from that, and eventually the benefit of slavery is going to really take root. Over time they're going to move away from these indentured servants, because as more and more of these enslaved Africans work their way onto the American continent, coming through the Middle Passage, after they had been packed on boats in Western Africa and brought over in the triangular trade, it's going to be just a cheaper and more effective way to meet this demand for the labor. And this slavery is going to set the tone, and it's going to become a major point of conflict between the North and the South repeatedly, and it's going to kind of really ultimately lead to the Civil War that we fight. The last point that the standard touches upon is this idea of the Great Awakening. And what the Great Awakening really is it's kind of a religious revival that's going to sweep through a lot of Europe and also the colonies in the middle of the 1700s. And what had been happening, which we're going to be kind of getting into in our next standard, is this thought of the Enlightenment. And as people begin to kind of read these Enlightenment thinkers, there's going to be kind of a step away from religion. And what's going to happen is in the middle of the 1700s, there's going to be this revival, and you're going to start to get a rapid growth of evangelical sects of Christianity. Two in particular you're going to have are Methodists and Baptists. And what's going to happen is these people now are going to kind of challenge the established religious order, and also in some cases the governmental order, because of their new beliefs, believing that religion is kind of a personal thing. And this is going to kind of lay one of the social foundations for the American Revolution. And that concludes our discussion on the third standard of the USVA curriculum. And our next video is going to be discussing the Enlightenment thinkers that helped fuel the rebellion that's going to ultimately take place in America. And we're also going to talk about the whole lead up to the American Revolution, including the Declaration of Independence, as well as the revolution itself. So until next time,